Do you know if you drink alcohol, you are an alcoholic? But if you drink Fanta, you are fantastic. I haven't spoken much about the IEMS that I really enjoy of late, and I think that this is time for me to share some of the earphones that I really enjoy in 2023. August. These earphones have STD, sound that totally dominate. If you are new to the channel and find this content interesting, do me a big favor and click the subscribe button down below. And if you are already subscribed, you are a very, very lovely person. There are some earphones that really suit me to a T, and today I'm going to share them with you in no particular order. First, the Simgot EM6L. I usually prefer more energetic sounding IEMs, but I can always appreciate a warm IEM once in a while, as it always acts like a palate cleanser for times where I get bored of the signature that I usually like. The EM6L is Simgot's latest offering, and it is quite a departure from the single dynamic driver models such as the EA500 or EW200 or 100. It features a hybrid design of 4 balance armatures that is mated to a dynamic driver as the engine for sound. The EM6L is a warmer and more lush sounding earphone in comparison, as it is quite influenced by the 2019 Harman preference target curve. Simgot did take some liberties with the curve by making it warmer through elevating the 100 to 200 Hz frequency bands. The EM6L has bass that is as powerful as a sumo wrestler, but almost as graceful as a ballerina. It is strong but not overwhelming, and you'll feel the music without it drowning out the rest of the sound. The sub-bass extension is quite excellent, and the dynamic driver handles it like a champ. The mid-bass is also thicker than previous Simgot models, and the definition of it is also pretty good. The bass dynamics are really quite lovely and with good levels of slam. The bass has a lot of character and it's not overall lacking in technicalities. Overall, it has a pretty prominent and enjoyable bass response. The mid-range of the EM6L is so warm and lush, it'll make you feel like you want to cuddle up with a good book and a cup of hot chocolate. Male vocals are particularly enjoyable with good weight and gravitas. Female vocals are also warm and full, but with a more nimble character. Instruments are also very full sounding with plenty of definition. Clarity is good but not exceptional, which is to be expected given its warm and lush tuning. The overall tone is smooth, but it has enough bite to keep it interesting. The balance armature drivers used for the mid-range and treble don't make the sound overly rounded, which is actually a very big relief actually. Treble on the EM6L is also very sensitive to tip rolling, so please do take note. They do prefer wider bore ear tips for a better balance with the rest of the frequency, just to add a little bit more treble response. In terms of treble, it's kind of like the Truvia Project Red, but you get an impression of it being a warmer IEM due to the elevated mid-bass response. I don't find the EM6L to be extremely airy, but for its type of signature, it is good. So the second IEM that I enjoy would be the Kiwiears Quintet. The Harry Balls Fruit Brand's 5-driver IEM that uses a quad bridge design is another earworm of mine. I just feel like it is pretty technically impressive to be able to balance the different driver tones of 4 different driver styles and to make sure that it is pretty cohesive sounding without it becoming overly funky. As mentioned, the Quintet does have some magic when it incorporates a 10mm dynamic driver with a diamond-like coating that is layered on top of dual balance armatures. A microplaner is then used for the treble, and lastly a piezoelectric driver acting as the super tweeter. The Quintet has a mild V-shaped sound signature, which is quite different from the more common, natural, warm sounding IEMs that is, well, basically everywhere these days. The Quintet also offers class-leading soundstage and depth. Now, the Quintet has a very interesting timbre, which is largely due to the large mix of driver types. The dynamic driver adds a nice resonance to the bass frequencies, while the microplaner and piezoelectric drivers add some airiness to the overall tone. This makes it sound very realistic. In other words, it sounds like you are actually there in person listening to music in physical person. So, bass. On the Quintet, the sub-bass is the most prominent aspect, and the rumbles are beyond satisfactory. It is quite amazing that you can get rather respectable bass at 30 Hz. In terms of timbre, because the bass is handled by the dynamic driver, there is a nice wave of airy resonance when the beat drops. Mid bass here, as you can also see, really tapers off gradually, which allows punchy bass that never really bloats. I like how articulate the mid bass is, and it actually allows for bass runs to sound very lively. Just so you know, I actually listen to Red Hot Chili Peppers, and when I'm listening out to Flea, the bassists, they actually sound really good on this pair. Mid-range on the Quintet is very lively and sprightly. It has a very neutral tonal weight here and does not lean warm, but I think that this is to the benefit of the overall very spirited rendering of mid-range. Instruments in the mid-range just sound very energetic, so I was listening to Love Grows by Nobuo Uematsu from the Distant Worlds concert, and the interplay of instruments with the melody from the pianos to the flutes and later to the oboes, it just sounds super harmonious and articulate. Separation between the voicings are also pristine. This level of finesse in sound is certainly helped by the good performance of the tweeter and super tweeter. Vocals again adopt this neutral tonal weight and aren't all that warm, but this allows for a very detailed rendering of vocals. I like how female vocals sound on the Quintet. It is just pretty darn sweet. Might I add, I think that the level of details here is also pretty fantastic, and even better if you feed the Quintet through a decent DAP or dongle. Treble is pretty smooth and good, with good detail overall. I found that on the whole, the Quintet is quite airy. You do get some radiance with the Quintet, and I think that this helps with the other ranges such as mid-range to have a bit more separation. Cymbals and crashes have a very nice shimmer to the tone. This shimmer dissipates with very good class and never overstays its welcome like a hobo. Staging is a very strong point on the Quintet. You get very good soundstage at this price level. When it comes to width and height, that perception is also pretty pinpoint from the excellent treble response. And next would be the 7Hz Sonus. Now here is a sub 100 chifi that I personally really rather enjoy. This is the latest IEM release by 7Hz. The Sonus is a hybrid design of having one dynamic driver and one balance armature. It has a balance signature that is an eclectic blend of bass that is balanced very delicately with the beautiful upper mids. The upper mids are a little exciting but never ever wanders off to the realm of harshness. It has a different voicing from the sea of neutral warm IEMs in the market of late that can be a little bit boring. It has a unique sound signature that really sets it apart from many neutral warm IEMs on the market that can be a little dull. In other words, it sounds like a party in your ears while the others sound like a warm library. When it comes to bass on the Sonus, this sounds a bit faster compared to its competition. Sub-bass extension is actually really good. It has very realistic resonance that tapers naturally into the mid-bass. On the whole, bass resolution is pretty impressive with very nice resonance. It is also pretty speedy sounding without bass bleeding all over the place. I think for the target price, the technicalities in the bass region is actually pretty impressive. In terms of bass, the Sonus has a modest quantity. It does not have an enormous bass hit level quantity of bass that just envelops everything, but it has a reasonable amount to act as the foundation for the other frequencies to build upon, and done so in a very tasteful manner. Dynamics when it comes to bass, it's actually natural and it's pretty much expected from this reasonable amount of bass rather than bass hit quantities, still making them pretty engaging to listen to. The Sonus has good sub-bass extension that does not muddy the mids, and it's also pretty fast sounding bass that doesn't really bleed into other frequencies. For the price, it is impressive. Mid-range, when it comes to tonal weight, the Sonus maintains a very natural presentation. It is neither warm nor cold leaning, and it gives a truthful rendering of tone. Vocals have a slight bump in the upper mid-range, which makes them sound delicately focused and provides a outstanding separation compared to the supporting instruments. There is a silkiness when it comes to female vocals, and I think how the Sonus renders it is actually quite amazing for ACG style music. Male vocals adapt the natural presentation that is shown in the Sonus. It does not come across as overly throaty or gritty, but rendered in a very natural way. Transparency is also quite awesome for a product in its price range. There is very good definition between the notes for both vocals and instruments that is matched with a lifelike tonality. When it comes to instruments, the Sonus does it in a way where it is crisp like an apple. There is very good note definition as mentioned just now, and it can easily aid in the perception of separation. Treble. I like how treble is rendered on the Sonus. I think that the extension on the Sonus is very decent, and it does not have much strange peakiness in the upper registers. Treble is smooth like a baby's bottom, but that said, it's still energetic and gives a very nice defined shape to the rest of the range, certainly quite airy. Treble nuances such as crashes and cymbals are finely balanced with enough bite without it becoming overwhelming. And next, let's talk about the soundstage. When it comes to width and height, I found that the Sonus does a very reasonable job. It is larger than average in its price category and it is simply more nimble sounding. Extension is wide and tall to a good degree. Depth and positioning. I found depth to be good on the Sonus, but perhaps not to the level from earphones that are a little bit more dynamic. Positioning, on the other hand, is very strong on the Sonus. The effortless treble allows instrument positioning to be quite pinpoint. And next, number 4 on the list would be the Simgot EW200. For friends who are very broke, don't worry, I got you. The Simgot EW200 is my pick for those of you who are on a very tight budget and yet want an IEM that is just scraping the bottom of the barrel, almost. Its price is just a hair above sub US $20 that offers quite a bit more. Firstly, it has a metal chassis that is quite unlike its cheaper brother, the EW100. Actually, the EW200 is kind of like the EW100, had sexy time with a more expensive EA500 and eventually they made a baby. So anyways, when it comes to sound, the EW200 is quite different from both the EA500 and EW100, where it is a warmer and fuller bodied sound compared to the two mentioned before. It is also less warm than the EM6L. The EW200 has a signature that will suit the masses better, as the EW100 and EA500 has that niggling upper mid-range that for some people who are new to the hobby, it can feel a little bit too hot. Bass here is quick and fast but yet has a very expansive resonance. It's not dry sounding where bass hits and just dissipates super quickly. Extension in the bass is also pretty good as you still have pretty good sub-bass response at 30Hz. I do enjoy the sub-bass transition to mid-bass. The mid-bass here is slightly elevated compared to the sub-bass, which actually gives body to the bass texture. Bass here is taut and dynamic, which makes them very suitable for a large number of genres. In terms of quantity, these are certainly not bass cannons and will not fulfill any strange fantasy of being a subwoofer. I do find that they are well balanced when taking the entire sonic context. Mid-range, as bass is a little bit more meaty on the EW200, this allows for the mid-range to continue the trend of being slightly beefier. I mentioned earlier that this is a V-shaped IEM, but I don't find the dip in the mid-range to be too severe where vocals sound way recessed. What you get here is vocals that sit a hair recessed but should not be too much of a problem, as humans tend to be able to hear vocals better anyways. Separation in the mid-range is actually quite elaborate despite its beefier nature. Instruments still sound pretty nimble despite a slightly thicker character as well. The notes here are pretty well defined. So vocals are something that I'm quite smitten here with. There is a touch of warmth that makes vocals very magical, and this applies to both male and female vocals. I think the mid-range transitions into the upper mid-range quite seamlessly, which is something that I prefer on the EW200 more so than the EW100. Also, when it comes to details, I found that the EW200 is able to render details quite well, especially when I'm using a higher end DAP. Treble extension on the EW200 is pretty good, to be honest, as it extends effortlessly to 12 to 13k Hz. There is a very nice complementary add that gives overall a greater natural tonality. Cymbals here are crisp and fast that does not sound out of place. Making treble effortless really takes quite a bit of effort, and it is easy to be a little bit too heavy-handed, which can cause a bit of shrilly things going on, but this is not the case on the EW200. I like how the slightly thicker tones from the bass and mid-range gives a little bit more weight to the treble, and yet it does not completely make it fat and overweight. I think treble here is actually done pretty well. Soundstage, width and height. As for soundstage with regards to width and height, the EW200 is pretty good and it does sound adequately wide. Depth and positioning, usually with a thicker signature you get a weaker perception of depth and positioning, but I think that the EW200 bucks this trend. There is enough micro contrast between the notes that allows for instruments not to congeal together. And lastly, this is one that I really enjoy, and I don't own this IEM, I just heard it for a really long time at Hong Kong AV and they had to pry me out of the seat because other people are waiting in line for it, and that would be the Aroma Audio Feiwan. So you know, sometimes when you hear an IEM, the impression that it leaves on you is so strong that you just want to keep listening to it. I heard the Feiwan at Hong Kong AV and it has become one of my favorites this year. I actually spent quite a bit of time at the Aroma audio booth because of this, and it cannot get out of my mind. So the Feiwan is Aroma Audio's brand new flagship that has 10 BA stuff into it, and that is also paired with a dual dynamic driver. In terms of sound, this is a balanced set that masterfully blends the frequencies harmoniously with very fine resolution. I found the Feiwan to be exceptionally airy without the use of ESC drivers, which was popular quite a while back. They managed to do this with balanced armatures instead, and I adore that there isn't any overly rounded balanced armature tonality, which I really do not like. To me, the Feiwan was the highlight of HKAV for me, and I cannot wait to test this further if I have gotten the opportunity. And with that said, I hope you liked today's episode of the Superchunk Super Audio Shows, where I share some of my recent favorite IEMs of 2023. It's great to be back in Simgot, back in the studio to talk to you guys about all these things. And if you've got any questions you would like to ask me, please leave them in the comment section below. I'm usually quite active in replying. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like the content so far, please kindly press the like and subscribe button, as it will help me out an amazing bunch. And I know that you guys are amazing people. With that said, I hope to see you guys very soon.